Hi, everybody. Welcome to All Games New and Old. I'm David Rodriguez here with another episode of The Mic Drop, where I interview someone from the board game community and then we debate a not too controversial topic. And today I am here with Scott Lowe-James. How's it going, Scott?
Hi. Yeah, good. Thanks. Yourself?
I'm doing okay. I really appreciate you coming on. I had another interview lined up and something happened where she was not able to make it at the last minute. And so I kind of got on Twitter and said, hey, anybody out there want to come and chat with me because I'm lonely? And you jumped in and I really appreciate you doing that. So this is gonna be fun. I don't have as much background as I sometimes do, but that's okay because this is what it's all about is learning about who you are. So why
Yeah,
don't
no
you tell
problem.
people what you do in gaming?
Okay. As David said, I'm Scott Lowe-James, and I'm a board game designer slash publisher. I run my own publishing company, Minerva Games, and I also run a design community in South London as well.
That's fantastic. I know I when we were talking a little bit earlier, I know you wanted to talk about the design community, and since you're in the whole design business over there, let's touch on that first because I want to make sure that we talk about that. So
Yeah,
how did
sure.
this come to pass, and what exactly do you do?
So I joined the tabletop industry probably about 6 or 7 years ago. I started in the miniature wargaming industry
Oh yeah.
because that's actually what got me into tabletop gaming from like about age 9. I actually came to board gaming quite late on, um, but I was working in the miniature wargaming industry, and that's how I kind of got started playing board games.
Mhm.
And then when I moved and got another job, I kind of wanted to keep doing something that was creative related to tabletop games. So I joined with a couple of friends to design games, and one of them who already had a group of people that they play tested with in South London. So we joined them and we tested the games that we were designing, and then they moved away, and the group kind of needed to keep going. So I spoke to one of the other organizers and offered to help, promote it, keep it running, and everything like that. So I started advertising it online, and we started to grow a bit. And it got to the point where the other organizer was like, "Look, I'm terrible at doing things online. Like I'm a mostly analog guy. Uh, can you just kind of like take over?"
Oh wow.
And I'm terrible at saying no when people ask me to to do things, because I really enjoy organizing stuff. So I was just like, yeah, sure, it'd be fine. Just thinking, this it won't be a huge deal. Like I think at the time there's maybe like 6 of us who met once a month. That was 4 years ago.
Okay.
And so we're just starting our 5th year. We now meet every week, and we usually have at least a dozen people every week.
Wow, that's great.
Which is, yeah, it obviously we had a bit of a lull during our lockdown through COVID, but afterwards it just exploded, and it's grown so quickly. Um, yeah, last year was absolutely fantastic.
Wow, that's awesome. So if someone wants to get involved in your group, how do they go about doing that?
We've got a presence on a few different places. So the network is Playtest UK. So this is a network of designers and playtesters. Funnily enough, in the UK, we have groups who are all around the country, or countries. Um, so yes, we've got them in Scotland, Wales, England. Um, and most of them have like their own communities, and then we usually get together at bigger conventions as well. um, so we have a meetup group for Playtest UK, which covers every single group, so no matter your location, you can find out what's going on there. And then um, for our group, specifically South London, we have a Facebook group as well, where we post all our events and people can talk about what they're up to.
Okay, well that's pretty easy to find then. It sounds like when like if I join, let's say I was in England, I'm very far from it, so not likely to join the group. Nothing personal. Let's say I join the group and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna show up with my thing I've designed. Like, do you have do you have some kind of a system to make sure that everyone's games get tested, or because I know, like I've heard there's some people who show up with a game and they'll want their game played and they're not so good about sticking around to play other people's games. Do you guys have a way to kind of deal with that kind of situation?
Yeah, I mean, we have a few we have had a few people like that, and we've also had a few people who'll bring their game, but they don't want to feel like they're intruding, and they don't want to feel like they're forcing people to play their game.
Oh,
So they'll
yeah.
come along and they'll be quite quiet about it. But there's a few of us who are regulars who are there pretty much every week, and so we know what's been played week to week, whether
Mm,
people are new, how often people have been there. Um, we try to make sure that as many people's games get tested, like in a session. But the thing about having a big group of designers is there's always far more games than there are people. So
right.
yeah, we make sure that we keep them cycling. We we try to say to people, like, we can't guarantee that your game will get played the first. We have had that instance before where people have just kind of turned up and were like, "Oh yeah, I'm looking to play test my game," and it turns out that the game's already on Kickstarter and they're not actually interested in testing it at all. They're just
Oh,
interested
wow.
in promoting it.
Mm.
Um,
Oh, interesting. Wow.
so yeah, we usually say, like, come along, try it out for a session, make sure that you're happy with the group and everything, um, and then come back and we'll test your game, because we say to people, like, try and try and give more than you take. So if a few people play test your game and it takes like an hour, then you've got at least like 3 hours to kind of put back to other people. So you don't
Right.
want to be you want to make sure that you're contributing, really, because that the community, like, everyone puts their time in to help each other. Really, that's what we're here for.
Okay, that's good because I hope there's not too many people out there who would just try to take advantage of a group in that way, but I know that they exist, unfortunately.
It's very small. Yeah, the
Yeah.
I think we had about 80 different people, like, just last year, come and play test with us, and I would say it happened once.
Oh, that's not too bad at
Um,
all.
yeah, I'm a bit of a stats nerd, which I find has quite a crossover with board gaming.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I kept track of like, who attends, what games get played week in, week out. So I was looking at them, and I think we had quite a high percentage rate of people attending, like, more than once, which was really nice
Mm,
to see, because it means that obviously we're doing something right and people are enjoying themselves and they want to come back.
right. Well, I know since you're actually, I would say, like really like in the games industry, having published games. Do you help, I guess, tutor people on how to get their games out to companies, or I don't know if they would typically go the Kickstarter route or anything like that? Because like I could see, if I made a game and we fine tuned it and I got to the point where it was pretty good, I still don't know if I'd really know where to go to get this thing seen by the people who need to see it. Is that something that your group helps with as well?
Yeah, so we have quite a, like, diverse group when it comes to experience. We have people who have only just started designing games, and they're just doing it for the fun of it. Like, they played a game and they were like, "Oh, I really like this, but this is this one thing that I don't like about it. I'm going to design something that's similar but change what I didn't like." And then we
Right.
have some people who, they've been designing for years, decades, and they're like, "Yeah, I want to get games in front of a publisher. So I design games to pitch to people." And then we have a few of us who are already publishers who've published at least one game, either through self-publishing or signing other people's games. And then we have a few people who are on the route to Kickstarter as well. So yeah, we have the hobby designers, we have the designers looking to pitch to publishers, looking to self-publish, all sorts. So we have generally, whatever people are looking to do, we have someone who has experience who can kind of like give them advice. That's what I think is great about the group, is that everyone is willing to talk people through their experiences and what like might help. No one really keeps anything to themselves, because the board game industry is unlike most other industries. We are, I hear the term cottage industry thrown around quite a bit, which means that there's still lots of little people like me who are just, doing their own thing and somehow turning it into a business. So we don't see each other as like competition. That's the
Right.
thing. Like every time I exhibit at a convention, I never look at the people across from me and be like, oh, I need to make sure that that I get people coming to my stand instead of theirs, so they'll buy my game. Because let's face it, we're board gamers. Like we'll see a game that
Right.
we like and we'll be like, oh yeah, that looks great, I'll buy that. And then we'll go across to look at another stand and like, oh, that game looks great, I'll buy that. It's
Yeah,
the
that's
it's
one
the
thing.
two cakes theory. I don't know if you've
Yeah.
heard of that before. Yeah.
It sounds I I feel like I have. I don't know if I have all the details down, but I that's one thing, I'm not in the same position as you. I'm kind of just a fan of board games, and I do my videos and whatnot. But it seems like everyone that I've heard or I've talked to myself, the way they describe the games industry makes it seem so different from almost any other industry I know anything about. Because yeah, there doesn't seem to be the same cutthroat level. They're not going to be like, oh no, don't buy that game. That one's trash. You want this one over here. Like, and there might be someone out there who does that, but I mean, it seems like overwhelmingly people are very cooperative with each other, even when they're technically, competitors or what have you,
Yeah.
which I think
Yeah.
is
I'm sure
so
there are
cool.
those kind of people who, are a bit more, yeah, like you said, cutthroat, maybe a bit more like
Mm.
combative. The thing is, that you find with a lot of people, especially, we saw it on Kickstarter recently, where there was a campaign that went up and the game was identical to an
Oh yeah.
existing game. That it turns out that the people had actually play tested the game,
Right.
and
Yep. I
then
saw
it
that.
was almost identical apart from a different theme. That was called out online, and people did their research and found out, oh, actually, yeah, this person went play tested this person's design, and then a couple of months later, an almost identical game popped up on like Kickstarter, and they cancelled it because they were like, look, we know this looks bad. They didn't necessarily say that they did it, but that kind of community atmosphere does have a bit of like self-policing to it,
Yeah.
where if someone does try and steal your game, or you know um say something that's not right, people kind of call them out for it. I mean, I'm not going to say that the board game industry couldn't learn things from some of our bigger cousins,
Mhm.
um, because it is such a vastly expanding industry. There's a lot of companies who have kind of are just people making games who then like hire people, and they become an actual business, and they don't really have
Right.
like the infrastructure
Yeah.
in place to support that kind of thing. And that's where we start hearing about like bad business practice, or like overworking, or god forbid, you know harassment and that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Because turns out you don't only have to be able to design games, but you also have to be able to run a business to do it
Right.
successfully.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's
Yeah.
definitely good things and bad things.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that's kind of the thing is, people who really are passionate about whatever it might be. In this case, board games. They want to get into the industry, which is great, but then sometimes they get into an area that is not really that they're not really actually well suited for, or they just haven't learned enough to succeed at.
Hmm.
And yeah, you hear about these problems, especially when it is like you were saying with harassment. I'm not going to call out anybody. There's been a few times where I was like, oh man, they're like that. Oh dang it,
Yeah,
it's too bad, but it happens.
I
So
think the good
yeah,
thing,
go ahead.
sorry, the good thing about the industry expanding is obviously that we're hearing more about it, not because it's happening more, but because people are talking about it more, which means that we lead to better change. So as the industry gets bigger, we'll probably will lose a bit of like that community feel. It still exist amongst like people like me who
Right.
don't really have like lofty goals, but yeah, as companies get bigger and they kind of get their act together, as it were, you hope that would lead to less problematic stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, um, I'm curious. So we kind of got like really in the thick of things, but let me kind of step back a little bit. Because you said that you started into board games because you came through wargaming, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I kind of did too, at least in a way. So I'm curious. Can you tell us about the origins of how you got into this hobby?
Yeah, sure. So, as I said, I started with like miniature wargaming,
Hmm.
Games Workshop. Obviously, it's
Yeah, I
the
figured.
classic gateway into
Yeah.
miniature gaming. When I was like 9 years old, I started just painting Warhammer Fantasy figures because I found some that my friends had, and then the Lord of the Rings came out. You'll be able to age me at that point. And I was a huge Lord of the Rings fan.
Right.
And then the miniature game came out, and that was it. I was hooked. Um, and then I fell into Warhammer 40k, Blood Bowl, pretty much anything that Games Workshop put out. I dabbled with when I was younger, and then I carried on playing that throughout university. But then university got me involved with like card games like Magic, um, which is another kind of universal experience, I think,
Yeah.
especially like finding a D&D group at university. So this kind of started me branching out into other stuff. Usually I'd find one thing and obsess over it. It would become my main thing for a long time.
Mm.
I think that's just how my character works. So yeah, for a while it was Magic, and I was going to like Friday night Magic tournaments. Dabbled a bit in high level tournaments. Realized it was not for me because it brings out a certain kind of person,
Yeah.
not the kind of person I want to be playing games with. Um, but yeah, wargaming got me a job, something my mum told me would never happen. It was a phase, and I wasn't going to
Right.
get a job playing with toy soldiers. So that's when I moved down to London to start working with Hawk War Games, who made Drop Zone Commander and Drop Fleet Commander. Um, and it was there that I met people who were not only into wargaming and Magic the Gathering, but also into board games. And that's where I played my first game of Seven Wonders Duel, and I was like, this is really good. This is great. Um, Sadly, Hawk got bought out by a bigger company, and we were all shipped off.
Oh man.
Which is when, as I mentioned, I started with some friends to, design, develop board games, but I also started working at a board game cafe shortly after. So then there was just shelves and shelves of board games, most of which I'd never heard of. At this point, I had never played Carcassonne, I'd never played Catan, I'd never played, Ticket to Ride, all those staples. And yeah, there was just an entire board game library. So I'd like borrow games from them, take them home, and then play them with my girlfriend or my flatmates, and then return it and then take another one. And I was like, it's research, I've got to be able to teach people the board
There you
games like
go.
when I'm
Yep.
at work. And from there, it just kind of spiraled.
Yep. Okay. That yeah. I could. I got to tell you, like I have not worked in a board game store specifically, and I think that's really good. For a while, I worked at a GameStop, which is
Oh
video
yeah.
games, and we used to have to write down our purchases so they could keep track of how you're using your employee discount and whatnot.
Mm.
And one day, my manager came up and said, like, "Hey, did you realize last month that you spent more here than you made?" I was like, "God, that's why I don't have any money right now." I know because I'm talking myself into things all day. Did you have to use a ton of willpower not to just buy a bunch of stuff, or was it enough that you could borrow it that you didn't feel like you had to buy things as often?
I mean, borrowing was great, and it did really help. I'm
Mm,
also lucky that I have where I live now. I have a board game cafe that's like 20-minute drive away, and that's
right.
where I run my playtesting group. But also, I go there for fun. I practically live there. Shout out to the Ludicrous in Croydon. But it means that I'm able to try loads of games that, when you get that temptation, you're like, oh, I should buy this and see what it's like. I can just go there and try it and play it. And if I like it, then I can play it a couple more times before I decide, yeah, I'm going to buy that. I think the main thing that stopped my board game collection just from like absolutely exploding was I was limited by space. So at the time, we were saving up to buy a house and we were living in one room. And so I
Oh,
had
wow.
like a drawer under my bed. So it's like, this is where my board games live. And if they don't fit in this drawer, I can't have them. So I had to be like really picky about what I did buy. So I started to like discover my love for like small box games, minimalist games, that kind of stuff. So yeah, like games like Deep Sea Adventure, Jaipur, like these tiny boxes that actually had quite a lot in, um, became like mainstays of my collection. And even though I've got, an entire cupboard now that I can put my
Right.
games in, I would say half of my games are still made up by like small box games because that's I just really like what's it like, restriction breeds creativity, and I really
Yeah.
like that kind of that aspect of design. And that's what I tried to do with Swatch and my other games as well. I'm always thinking like how small can I make this box? Like
Yeah.
the kind of the amount of game that you get out of the size of the box. Like how can I maximize that?
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, I have way too many big games. And I will run out of space very soon. I mean, even if I take into account Kickstarters and whatnot that will show up whenever they show up, if I don't get rid of things, I don't know where I'm gonna put all that. So I'm gonna have to go through my collection to figure out what I'm removing. But the small box of games are great. I've got a few, bins that have the smaller games in them. And
Mm,
I could probably just take that out and have a good entire vacation just playing out of there and not even touching
exactly.
the
Yeah.
gigantic games. So, and Jaipur is excellent. So I mean that's a great game. Um, so how did you get into designing?
I mean, it's kind of that thing of like I've always been creative, always been making things. But it's very rare that I ever actually like finished a project. I'd have
Right.
fantastic ideas and I would start them, and then I think at some point I would realize that I couldn't make it as good as I imagined it, and I would just kind of stop and get distracted by the next great idea. And this wasn't like board games at the time. It was my background is in graphic design, so I had lots
Okay.
of like different projects that I thought I'd enjoy doing. So when I started developing games, I kind of really got like involved in the industry proper, and I started having ideas of my own. And that's when I kind of started thinking about branching out because with any other company, there's always like a release schedule, and I was like, wow, even if my game ideas were good enough, it's still going to be another 3 years down the line before I see anything. I was like, wow, I'm just impatient. I want it now.
Yeah, that's painful.
So so that's when I branched out and founded Minerva. And I had a couple of ideas. But the real catalyst I found to actually get me to make the games was just telling people I was going to do it,
Hmm.
and that kind of forced me to actually do something. So um, when I started designing Swatch, or well, technically before I just started designing Swatch, which is my first game, I said to one of my friends who ran a games convention in the south of England, I was like, "Oh, I want to playtest a game that I've designed at your show." And he was like, "Oh yeah, that'd be great. We'd love to have you along. What game have you designed?" And I was like, "I don't know. I haven't made it yet." I just knew that I wanted to make something, and I was like, "This
Right.
is this is great. This is a tangible deadline where I have to make something." So at that point, I started making, like social media profiles, branding. I mean, like I said, being a graphic designer, I'd already come up with the branding and the logo and the stuff like that before I even designed a game because those are kind of like exercises that were in my head. I already knew kind of what I wanted.
Mhm.
And so then I had 6 weeks to design a game and get it to a point where I could play test it.
Oh my gosh.
So
Okay.
that that really, lights a fire under you.
Yeah,
But
no kidding.
I managed to do it. Not only managed to do it, but I managed to get a professionally printed prototype as well, which is, I don't tell anyone else to do this now because it's a terrible idea. Because you could play it and it could just be absolute trash. But
Right.
I think because I wanted something, again, in my background, like I did a lot of print work, so it
Mhm.
just made sense to me to get it printed. So I got a one-off prototype made, and then tested it. And then by the end of the convention, which was a weekend long, the cards were like drawn on in permanent marker, had like little slips of paper put in the sleeves to modify them. It was really interesting. Luckily, it was kind of like an abstract strategy game, so it's mostly like numbers and colors, because
Okay.
Swatch is about it's an art themed game about mixing color. So it was quite easy to modify. If I decided, to make any other kind of game, I would have had to throw that in the bin immediately and remake it. But yeah, as it was, I was just able to modify some of the bits, and I still have that copy as well. I still have this hastily scribbled on first ever prototype of Swatch.
That's gotta be kinda cool to look back on since, since I know that one's already, done and out and available, just to kinda see where it came from to where it is now has gotta be, I don't know, an interesting progression to look at. So
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
yeah, I think that's really cool. I think I'd probably go back to that every few years just to kinda, I don't know, remember when, I guess. But, so can you tell me about Swatch and the general idea of the game and at least a basic idea of how it's played?
Yeah, sure. So it's called Swatch, the Abstract Game of Art, and it's a game about artists experimenting with color, mixing colors together to create new color schemes. So the game itself is a card drafting resource management game,
Okay,
where all the resources are different colors, and it uses cyan, magenta, and yellow that you collect and mix into red, green, and blue. For anyone into their color theory,
mhm,
and then you spend those tokens to make swatch cards. And the swatch cards are kind of like the paint cards, the paint samples that you get when you go into like a hardware store. When you're looking, like there's just be rows and rows of them that you can check amongst.
right.
Um, and that was kind of a bit of the inspiration, is that I wanted these cards to look like, like a Pantone card or like a paint swatch card. So you use those resources to collect the swatches, and you'll have a scheme card, which is kind of like your objective for the game, and you're
Okay,
looking to collect colors that match that scheme. So there's 24 swatch cards in the game, which are all different hues across the spectrum, and they'll have different resource costs depending on where they are between, red and violet at the end. Um, and so you'll have like they're split into 6 decks, and so you can see kind of like the progression of color in front of you, and you'll have a different combination of those colors. But each deck has slight variations, so you have an idea of what your color scheme is going to end up like, but you can never like know exactly.
okay. That sounds kinda I feel like there's been, a a small number of games that kind of are focused on color and whatnot in the last few years, but that one actually seems really interesting. I've not played any of those yet. I want so if I'm gonna pick one, I'll probably play yours now that I've actually spoken to you. So,
Thanks.
is that something that's readily available in stores or is it through like a website or how would people get a hold of that one?
So I sell it direct on my store
Great,
at any conventions I visit, and it's also stocked in retail as well. Um,
perfect.
in the UK in a number of stores, but also there's a couple of stores in the US that stock it as well.
All right, great. And so beyond that, you have another game that's coming down the pipeline here, and
Yes,
I'm blanking on the name. It has to do with making sandwiches, though, correct?
it is. It's called Crumbs.
Crumbs, that's right. Okay, I was like, oh, it was like on the tip of my tongue, and I couldn't remember, and I'm bummed I couldn't remember because sandwiches are near and dear to my heart. Is there a more perfect food? I don't think so. So,
Oh
uh,
yeah, it's
so,
fantastic.
so what can you tell us about Crumbs?
So Crumbs is a game. as you said, about making sandwiches. It's an 18 card micro game,
Mm,
and it's solo slash cooperative for 1 to 2 players. And so you're playing as the owner of a cafe in the lunch rush, and you've got a load of customers coming up making their orders, and you've got to make them as quick as possible. So all 18 cards represent ingredients. So you've got obviously your bread, and then you've got like ham, cheese, salmon, avocado, salad, egg, and these are all laid out in front of you. You choose 2 ingredients at random and flip them over, and on the reverse of every card, apart from the bread, is a list of orders.
okay.
So you'll have like a customer icon and the sandwiches that they want. So you'll flip over the first one and you'll have your first few orders. And then you have 5 actions to make a sandwich. At the end of every 5th action, if you haven't made a sandwich, it's game over. You're taking too long and the customers get bored and they're going to go off to the sandwich shop around the corner.
Right.
So it's very much a game of like action efficiency. You're going to be trying to make the most of the actions that you have, which are very simple, but you can get a lot out of them. So there's only 3 actions in the game. One is take as much as you want of one ingredient and put it on your prep area. The other is restock an ingredient. So if you've used a card previously, they're put to the side and you can
Mm,
restock them back into your counter.
okay.
Because obviously, as an 18 card game, there's only limited cards in play at a time. So you want to make sure that you getting them back in to be able to use them. And then the final one is to toast bread, because
Okay.
sometimes people will want a toasted sandwich. So you
Sure.
take your bread card, and then when you flip it to the other side, it has a little toasted side.
Oh,
And
clever.
so what you're going to be looking to do is make the sandwiches that people are asking for, but looking ahead and trying to make as many at the same time as possible. So, for instance, I could take one action to lay like 3 bread cards out, and then say I can see that 2 sandwiches that are upcoming both need ham. I can use one action to take both ham cards and put them on separate pieces of bread. So I'm using one action to kind of prep 2 sandwiches at once.
Okay.
I'm not sure if this would actually work in real life. I've not put it to the test. I feel like you'd end up with some really messy sandwiches, but
Probably.
you're at the top of the game in this cafe.
Right.
So yeah, it's trying to make sure that you can make the most of each action, whether that's restocking an item before then using it to put it across as many sandwiches as possible. Yeah, it can get tight towards the end when you realize that your counter is practically bare, and some guy's turned up and he wants one of everything between some bread.
Right. Well, that's awesome, and it'll probably make me very hungry to play that. Uh, the other thing, you might have people begging you for expansions, because what if their favorite sandwich fillings are not included in this? They might need their peanut butter and jelly expansion, or what have you. That could.
Definitely for the US market, yeah. Might have
Oh,
to
okay,
do
is
as
that
like a
is that
might
not
have
a
to
thing
do a
in
little.
England?
Not as definitely not as
Interesting. Okay,
big as it
well,
is in the
see, I
US.
just don't know.
It's definitely like the ingredients have more of like an English tilt. They're
Fair enough.
we did speak to like US players to be like, hey, do these sandwiches make sense to you? Like, what's the most common thing that you have in sandwiches? So yeah, I mean, everyone knows a grilled cheese, but
Right.
I don't know if, for instance, you have like salmon and avocado with like a poached egg on top or whatever it's called. Has a it's
I've
a
not seen it, but it sounds good. I mean,
it's a bougie little treat. Yeah, it's kind of like a
okay.
a, a brunch thing.
Okay, fair enough. I've not tried it, but it sounds pretty good. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm definitely
I,
going to
I
make a note of that, like PB&J promo pack.
yeah, there you go. Yeah, help us out. We don't know these fancy things over here. I don't know. All right, well, very cool. And when is that going to be available? Is that going to be just going to retail? Or are you doing like crowdfunding, or how's that happening?
Yeah, we're going to be crowdfunding that
Okay.
I'm saying summer at the moment. We're looking at like July time.
Okay.
But for now we're sticking with summer just in case.
Right on. Okay, well, I will be keeping my eyes peeled for it. And I mean, 18 cards, that's so nice. It's so good to have like some games that you could just kind of, put in your pocket, or my wife could put in her purse and have that wherever we go. I love that kind of thing. So,
Yeah, I really started to enjoy like 18 card games, especially
yeah.
during lockdown because a lot of them have like solo modes. Like
Mhm.
Sprawlopolis is one of my favorite games, full stop, by Button Shy.
Yeah.
Just the amount of stuff you can get out of 18 cards is fascinating, and that's where the designer of Crumbs, John, he has this talent for taking such a small amount of components and being able to like make so much use of it that actually most cards during the course of the game will get used, like 3 or 4 times.
Right. Yeah, I only recently played my first Button Shy game. They sent me a few to do reviews on, so I'm kind of trying to spread them out so it's not just like this big block of just Button Shy stuff. But I was I'm still kind of floored when I think about how much depth they have in the game
Oh
I
yeah.
played. And I got one of the ones I got was Sprawlopolis, and I haven't played it yet, so I'm looking forward to that. I think that's the one that I'd heard the most about.
Yeah,
That one, and
definitely.
then I also got Tussie Mussy, which I haven't tried that one yet either. But
Oh yeah, I've got that as well. I really enjoy that.
I've heard all good things. So yeah, so another, good small game like that is great. I'm appreciating that kind of thing more and more because I'm starting to feel the kind of fatigue of the big multi-box stuff, as I still have some that I'm waiting on that will show up, and I'll probably be like, "Oh god, what am I going to do with this?" Cuz it's so much. And it's so intimidating to even try to get that out, and to show that to another person, be like, "Here, do you want to play these 8 boxes?" And they're like, what? No, do I need to take a class in that first? Like, it's whether or not it's that complicated, it just seems like it's going to be so much to people that I think some people shut off when they see that. But if you bring out this thing that's just, you know, a small amount of cards like that, I think people are more willing to kind of engage and try something out that maybe they, otherwise would be a little nervous about. So,
Yeah, that's one of the things I've kind of learned as a designer is that things appear a lot harder than it does to you and I. Like we're very board game literate.
mhm,
But it turns out that not everyone who buys board games is as obsessed as us,
right,
and they do get intimidated by like a huge setup or like a thick rule book or stuff like that, and it's something you really have to consider when designing a game. I know my game inside out; it makes sense to me, but someone
right,
picking it up for the first time, you know, they might not have encountered like card drafting before. It might be completely new
right.
to them. So you have to assume that people don't know, the lingo, the jargon that everyone throws around as well. Yeah, it's very interesting. I think, like Eric Lang, for instance, obviously he's famous for designing, a lot of big box, quite deep games, but he's at the moment working on a lot of like mass market games, and he's talking quite a
Right.
lot about just how big the gulf is between people who play like your classic board games like Monopoly, Scrabble, that kind of stuff, who have played, you know, Ticket to Ride or Catan. There's a big jump between a classic game and a gateway game, but then the gateway game and hobby games, there's still a big jump. And I
Yeah.
think we sometimes don't appreciate how much of a jump it can be.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. The I've heard I listen to like a bajillion podcasts, so the number of interviews I've heard were people who work for companies that do a little more mass market stuff, but to have kind of that crossover appeal. But they still have to make their rules be able to explain concepts that like you could just say a term to us and we would know exactly what it meant, but they have to go in such detail as to what it means without having it be so much detail that it overwhelms people. And it's like I would have never
Mm,
thought that someone, didn't understand this, whatever the concept is, this particular concept. It's like it's kind of mind blowing to me. Like I think I heard a interview with Emma Larkins recently, who did
oh yeah.
Abandon All Artichokes, and she
Mm,
was talking about explaining to people that they even have a discard pile was weird. Like some people didn't understand that, and I was like, what? Like that's but it's because they don't play games that have that, and so it seems totally foreign to them. And I just it would never occur to me. But you know, that's why she's smarter than I am, I think. So, which is okay. All right, but talking about all these different types of games and how some things cross over and whatnot, there are two kind of subsets of games that in more recent years have had a lot of crossover, but still have a bit of divide. And so the subject of our debate tonight is going to be Euro games versus Ameritrash games. So without further ado, let's get to our debate segment. Okay, so here we go. We are going to do our debate, and the topic again is Euro games versus Ameritrash games. I'm sure we both have our own opinions on these matters, which is better, or how we feel about them. Then we'll talk about how we really feel at the end of the debate. But in the meantime, viewers, what I need you to do is listen to our arguments and tell us in the comments who actually won this debate, because neither Scott or I will be able to sleep if we don't know who is more convincing in this. It'll ruin us both, and we can't have that. He has important things to do, and I make silly videos. So, yeah, make sure you tell us. We can't go long without the knowledge of it. So, the way we do this is I'm going to randomize what side each of us are on, and then we're going to randomize our order that we speak in. So we're each going to have an opening statement, a middle or rebuttal statement, and then a closing statement. And then we'll tell you what we really think. So none of us are misrepresenting ourselves or get anger thrown at us that is not actually deserved. So I have, through the magic of technology, a little randomizer here. If I can get it without glare, that'd be awesome. Okay.
Got it.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if it is an odd number, Scott, you're going to be arguing on the side of Ameritrash games. If it's an
All
even
right.
number, you're going to be arguing on the side of Euro games. Okay. 3. So
Okay.
you're arguing on the side of Ameritrash games. Okay. This will be fun. All right. And so now I'm going to do the order that we are going in. And so if it's odd, you will be going first. If it's even, I'll be going first. Okay. So I'm going first. I'm
Okay.
arguing on the side of Euro games. Oh boy. This is going to be interesting because, as I mentioned at the top, like you came in sort of last minute to do this. Usually I've had at least some days to think about the interview or the debate topic.
Yeah.
And this is going to
Or
be
what you
something
might say.
I'm gonna have to pull from whatever I've thought about this in the past, and hopefully, I'll be convincing enough to win over the audience. We'll see what happens. Okay. So when hobby games first became popular, at least in the US, it was all pretty much Euro games. And I think the big distinction between these hobby games and what, at least here in the US, we played before was that, it was low randomization. There wasn't all this, players attacking each other, whatnot. It wasn't about people running around with giant guns, shooting aliens and that sort of stuff. It was this massive shift, and it became hugely popular over here. Now, I don't know the way it developed in England might be a little different, but what we saw over on this side of the pond was that all that stuff that we had in the past, the stuff that became that stayed basically for Ameritrash games, was frankly garbage. It was a mess. If you're going to play a game with a lot of dice rolling and whatnot, I mean, that's fine, I suppose, when you're like 8. But if you're going to do that, just flip a coin and say, hey, if it's heads, I win. If it's tails, you win, and be done with it. Euro games are great because you have knowledge of what's going on the board. Like there's no big shocks. You don't get screwed over by some ridiculous die roll or something like that. No, it's all going to be based on skill, based on your plans and how you enact them in the game. And that's how it should be. I mean, this is for the more mature audience. This is for the people who want to challenge their minds, who want to think about how they're going to get done what they need to get done and can enact a plan and get it to succeed. And the only trick is, can you be more efficient? Can you be more strategic than your opponents across the table from you? And you can never at the end of the game say, well, I would have done better if I'd have just rolled those dice better. It's all on you. And while some people might find that scary, that's how we improve as people. That's how we improve our minds. There's studies that say that gaming helps fend off things like Alzheimer's and dementia. And I think that's probably true. It makes total sense because games can be a real mental workout. But if you're just, if you're rolling dice and if it's all just like combat, shoot the aliens, fight the dinosaur, whatever nonsense you get in Ameritrash games, are you really engaging your mind that much? I mean, you may have a strategy, but if it falls apart at the end anyway, does your brain even register that mattered? I don't think so. I think that the Euro games with a low randomization, where it's all about just bettering your situation through the entire game, that is how you improve yourself as a person. That is how you protect your brain from future issues. Euro games are for grown-ups. Ameritrash games are for kids. Euro games are just clearly better. And that's my opening statement.
Very well done.
Thank you.
Okay, right. Well, I've got to follow that up now, haven't I? Okay.
You're cracking knuckles. I'm a little nervous.
Life is chaos. And let's face it, we want a bit of chaos in our lives. We don't want to know everything that's going to happen, as much as we might kid ourselves that we want everything planned out as far as we can see. We know that's never going to happen. And so it shouldn't happen when we want it. Right, let's start off with Ameritrash, because this is clearly a term coined as a European propaganda against the great American nation. Let's call these what they are, like, what, American style games, or I don't know, like rock flag and eagle games. We need a bit of rebranding here to really really show off what they can do. The greatest thing about American style games are the experience. That you're not going to reminisce with your friends about the one time you took 3 wood and managed to build a little shelter. You're going to be talking about the times when all seemed lost, the hordes were against you, and you managed to pull it out of the bag with your team to blast through those aliens and save the world. Which is more memorable and exhilarating. I mean, you've got that sense of excitement that you get when rolling a dice, because you're not quite sure what the outcome is. You can do everything you need to do to make sure that the dice are going to go your way, but you can never guarantee that outcome, and it's up to the dice to decide that for you. Let's not pretend that we have no influence whatsoever out through it. I mean, they always said no plan survives contact with the enemy. So why should it in games? I mean, you play far better roles in an American style game than a Euro game. Like, would I rather be a trader in the Mediterranean, or some downtrodden peasant in a muddy French field, or would I prefer to be a 7-foot bold space marine blasting his way through whatever stands in front of him? And like, whose fantasy isn't it to be a 7-foot bold man? Let's face it. I mean, where else can we go with this? I mean, artwork. should we talk about artwork for a moment as well? The the evocative nature of American style games. You look at the front of a box and you know exactly what you're going to be doing. They don't waste time with subtlety. Subtlety is not an American trait. Let's not mess around here. They're going to tell you exactly what is on the tin and how much of a good time you're going to do it. They might lie about how long it takes. Let's face it, that 60 to 90 minute on the box is not going to happen. You're going to be 2.5 hours later sweaty just making that final dice roll, but you'll remember it. We don't need some flat pastoral artwork on the front of a box of a man who looks mildly distressed in front of a castle. He's not promising us a good time. I think American style games take you out of your comfort zone, and we seek safety too much in board games. That's what Euro games offer you. They offer you that guaranteed outcome. If I go here, I'll get 2 wheat. Or you could play an American style game. You'd be like, if I go here, I might blow up and die. It's you need to be challenged, in your life, and that's what these games do. They push your boundaries. I think too much is emphasized on knowing too much. You need that bit of chaos in your life to bring you that excitement, and that's what American style games do.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I'll be honest. Everything you're saying makes some sense to me, at least as far as the positives of the Ameritrash games. The problem is, it's not that they're bad in a vacuum. If all we had were the two types of games to entertain us in the world, I think there'd be plenty of room for both. The problem is that the Ameritrash games are basically made redundant by the existence of video games. You don't need those Ameritrash games. You want to be a 7-foot Space Marine? Oh my gosh, there's a game literally called Space Marine where you're a 7-foot Space Marine. And you could see his chainsword like cutting into orcs and blood spewing everywhere, and beautiful art. I mean, it's there in the game. You can see it in motion. You can control that art, etc. I mean, I could go on about this, but I mean, look, you want that experience? You're getting like the most watered down version of that experience. Go play a video game. That's great. I'm not saying anything bad about video games. They're there for you, Ameritrash players. Go play them. It is so much more visceral if that's what you want. It's not technically random, but it'll feel like it, and you'll still get to have some skill because you got to aim your little crosshair wherever you need to shoot or whatever. I mean, go there. That's the perfect spot for a table or for a crazy, violent, attacky kind of experience. Perfect. But bring to the tabletop, you're not going to tell me that there is a farming simulator video game that does what Agricola does. Like, they can try, but I don't think they're really going to come close. And if you're worried that there's not high stakes, talking about Agricola, you could starve your family in that game. I mean, does it get higher stakes? I don't think so. Does the 7-foot tall Space Marine even have a family to worry about? Probably not. Those guys are weirdos. I don't even think they have a social life. They just worry about killing things, which is fine in a video game. Go put them over there. That's great. There's plenty of stakes in a Euro game. And sure, there may not be that many surprises, but that's sometimes life too. When the bad stuff is coming, it's coming, and you have to figure out how to prepare for it. And God forbid if it goes bad for you one time, you lose a couple kids or whatever, you got to figure out what you're going to do to make sure that doesn't happen next time. And you'll be ready next time. You will constantly be getting better. Not rolling better, or worse because randomness. You'll be getting better because of your skill, because your intelligence has increased. You understand these systems better. You are becoming a brighter, more brilliant minded individual with every play. Every failure makes you smarter, makes you more prepared for the next time. Not true in a Ameritrash game. Every failure in a Ameritrash game means you better hope you roll better next time because you knew what you had to do. You had to point at your opponent or the alien, whatever, and roll a dice and hit the right number. That's all you got. That's fine. It's okay. Again, if video games didn't exist, I'd say that that's wonderful, but you don't need them. They don't. You might as well get a unique experience when you're playing a tabletop game. Get something that video games can't do 10 times better. Forget about your Space Marines on the board. Don't get a Space Marine as a miniature. Don't get a Space Marine as a cardboard standee. Forget all that nonsense. You want sheeple and little cow meeples and little wood chunks representing wheat or what have you, or castle walls or anything like that. That dour looking man on the cover of some of these things standing in front of a castle. I know there's like 500 games like that. But if you're going to worry about the safety of of the earth in some Ameritrash games, worry about cheering that dude up. He needs that castle built. All right. You could change that man's world, by your own skill, not by dice rolls, not by hoping and praying it works out. You can do it. You just have to learn how. And you have to keep getting better until you can do it. And when you do succeed, when you do better than other people at the table and you are more efficient, when you do have your engine going just how you need to get everything done that you need to get done, you will feel triumphant. You will feel more triumphant looking over your cardboard and wood field than you ever would feeling triumphant over a knocked over alien miniature. I promise you that, because you will have earned that victory and you'll know it was all on you. It wasn't on a die roll or a card flip. That's what Euro games bring to you. True satisfaction, true victories or losses without a little asterisk about luck. So, don't listen to this guy talking about it's just nonsense. You can get that better elsewhere. Better yourself, play Euro games. That's my middle statement.
It's interesting that you mentioned failure there, because failure in our two genres of games are very, very different. If you fail in a Euro game, it's your fault. As you said, you thought you could do something and you misjudged your ability, and therefore you are reaping the consequences. And the more you fail, the more you realize that actually you're not as intelligent as you thought you were, and you watch your friends steamroller you in the points as they farm far more efficiently than you. All this is doing is grinding down your self-confidence. It's making you meek. And let's face it, do we need any more meek board gamers? No. We need an army of self-confident board gamers who exude that. We need a new breed of board gamers to evangelize the hobby to everyone else who couldn't care less about a farm. Whereas if you have failure in an American style game, it's the most perfect analogy for failure, an American failure. It wasn't my fault. It was somebody else's. I did everything right. It's not my fault that it didn't come through. I held up my end. it was the dice job, really, and they failed. But the thing is, if you succeed in an American style game, you can lord that over your friends magnanimously. You can literally tower over them at the table and scream in their face, because that dice roll, that flip of the card, will give you that adrenaline. But at the same time, so the dice giveth, the dice taketh away. And your fortunes could be flipped at any point, and soon you'll be cowering under the heel of your your opponent, and that keeps you humble. That means that you have to make the most of your time on the top, because you never know how long it's going to last, and that is a very important life lesson. It's interesting that you mentioned video games as well, because let's face it, video games are American style games for the lazy, who can't be bothered to imagine their own settings. They don't want to feel the components in their hand. They don't want to push the units across the board, or roll the dice to decide these pivotal moments. They just want to press a button and have all the hard work done for them. Let's not put those two in any kind of in relation. It's the dumbing down of an American style board game. However, there are, you said there's not a farming simulator that can capture the misery of Agricola, and you're right, I guess, in that point. But I could just open an Excel spreadsheet and type some formulas, and that will probably give me roughly the same experience. It nails the misery, and especially if I'm doing my taxes, like that's just that kind of German experience, isn't it? Let's take what could be a fun experience, and turn it into something just broken down into figures and numbers, because nothing's quantifiable, really, is it? If you're playing an American style game, everything's in flux. It keeps you on your toes. It keeps you flexible, adaptable. I think I've said enough there. I think I've highlighted the extreme highs of the best of American games, and the pitiful lows of watching your children starve as you wish that you'd bought that fish husbandry expansion.
All right, fair enough. I think there's this almost kind of cliche thing you'll see a lot of, where people ask someone of like, hey, if you could go back and change anything, there are all these difficult times and whatnot, would you do that? And invariably, people say no, I would not do that. I would not go back and change even the hard times, because those hard times made me who I am. They made me into this person I am today. And they're glad that they're that person, even though it meant, walking over the coals or whatever that their life brought them. It was hard. It was tough, but they're a more actualized person. And, I think when you talk about going through the misery of Agricola, and we're just pointing that one out. The same thing's true in many Euro games, where it is a struggle, a battle to get where you want, and it seems like all the odds are against you. That's true, but when you come through at the end, when you finally figure out how to overcome those difficulties that those games throw you, you will look at yourself and you will realize that you wouldn't go back and be winning from the start. You would go back and you would go through all those struggles again. You would let your family die 1,000 times to get you to that point where you got them to survive once and you got your farm thriving, or you got your kingdom, if you're building a kingdom, that's going well, or what have you. You're being the most successful trader after who knows how many times of failure. You will know that at the end, when you finally figured it out, when you figured out the way to do it so that everything worked just right, you arrived there through the sweat and the tears and the toil of your own efforts of learning those games perfectly. And you'll know that it is all on you. And you, if someone asks, if they say, would you go back and change that? You will say no, because I am the gamer I am today because I had to figure these things out on my own. You will be a more skilled gamer at those games you already played. And when more games come out that have little hints of those other games, you will always be more prepared. You will be a fuller, better gamer than you could ever be playing one dungeon crawl after another, where there's really nothing to learn. There might be traps over there. I don't know. You roll a die to avoid, I'm sure. There's a monster. Cool. Let's shoot an arrow. No. Do we have a line of sight? Blah, 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 blah. Boring. You don't learn anything. It's all the exact same thing. And even if you think you did learn a lesson, it can all just be screwed up. You're not improving yourself as a gamer. You're just being the same gamer you were the first time you played one of those. Through Euro games, you are advancing through these invisible ranks that no one can see, but we all know that they are there. We all know that there are the early gamers, and some of them never break out of that level where they're happy to just roll dice, and if they get sixes, they're happy, and if they don't, they're sad. Cool. But you are going to be the kind of gamer who can look at a game and you can see the systems because you have fought to overcome them time and time again. And you go in more fully armed to any game that you go into. You know how to be the most efficient. You know how to get everything done that you need to. And if a game comes and beats you down again, you are more ready because you are more able to see where you may have failed as you've played more Euro games and have done this. You've fought these battles time and time again, and you've won those wars that are not based on actual wars. They're based on perfectly, relatively peaceful, serene things. Nonetheless, still a struggle. I don't like to look down on anybody, but I think if we all look in our heart of hearts, we know Hero gamers are just better than Ameritrash gamers. Period. And you could try to deny it all you want to, but we know the truth. All the skill, all the patience, all the maturity lies in the people who chose Euro games over Ameritrash games. And the people who are playing the Ameritrash games are just rolling dice to see who can get the highest number at the end of the day, or flipping a card to see who get the best card at the end of the day. And that is why Euro games will always be far above Ameritrash games. And if you want to talk about lording it over your opponents, you can lord your Euro game knowledge over those who just play Ameritrash games. Look down your nose at them, and maybe one day they'll figure out what they need to do to climb out of that hole and be the gamer that you are. And that's my final statement on that.
If someone asked me if I could travel back in time and change something, would I? I would not have the same answer as your hypothetical person and say no. No, I learned from all of this. There's nothing that I could change to improve things. I would go back in time and I would persuade Clem and Franz to stop illustrating Euro games in the 21st century. It was fine. when when it was in Germany, and it was a a little print run in the 90s of a flat dour looking man staring at some livestock. But you know we're in the modern era now. We should have some better artwork. There's so many people out there, and look, I have someone who agrees with me. um there's so many more options now. We are in the boom of board games. Let's not argue that fact. There's so many options. There's something out there better, please. The world has evolved past the need for Clemens friends. In your closing statement, you used a lot of evocative words like struggle, war, battle, um, to describe a Euro game. What is a battle and a war? An actual war game, which you play battles in. So I feel like if you want to kind of use those terms, you might as well go for the real deal. I think if you showed me someone who said they would prefer to trade spices than ride a dinosaur that shoots lasers out of his eyes, I will show you a liar. If Eurogames are, typified by the development that you take through these games, as you learn from your struggles, and you better yourself. Why do you keep playing them if they're a struggle, and they're something to be endured? Why do you keep playing through them, and then why do you force them upon other people to play so they can go through the struggles of their own, when they could just be sitting back and drinking beer and throwing dice with their friends and having a good time from the word go? As I say, break the cycle of abuse, stop playing Euro games, and play American style games. Just have fun.
All right.
That will
Is
do.
that it?
Yeah.
All right. Wow, I said a lot of things, and you said a lot of things, and I have a feeling
I
we
think I
don't
really got
fully.
into that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fun. So now we're going to talk kind of how we really feel about this particular thing. I know I said some things that I don't actually agree with, especially that you should look down on any gamers of any stripe. Don't do that. Be cool. Whatever anyone likes is great. Let them enjoy it. Don't be jerks about it. Let me get that one out of the way right away. But how do you? I was like, God, I feel like a jerk saying this stuff. So how do you really feel this Ameritrash Euro game issue?
I've got to say, I played maybe like 90% Euro games. But I was secretly hoping to argue against them. That was
Yeah.
my idea, because I think you can have a bit more fun with it. Like, otherwise it just feels like I'm trashing on something I don't like.
Right.
It's not that I don't like American style games. Like, I do enjoy them, but I think just the way my brain works, I'm one of those dour statistics based people who just love efficiency. I'm sorry, Clemens. If you're watching this, I'm sorry. Your artwork is fine. I'm just scarred by those sheep looking at me on the
Yeah.
front of
Yeah.
Agricola.
Yeah, I his style is not an art style that I particularly am drawn to, but I also think that it's, and maybe it's just from seeing the games for forever, but I also think it's fairly well suited to the stuff that he draws for. So, I
100%.
mean,
Yeah.
it'd be weird if
It's
you
it's
had.
not my kind of thing. Like, I
Yeah,
like, obviously kind of, I mean, I've made a game about art, so I like kind of like those heavily stylized kind of things that do jump out at you.
yeah,
Um, it's I've been put off playing some Euro games before, just kind of based on their artwork because I think because I'm a visual person.
Right.
But there's so many out there. It doesn't really matter. Like
Yeah.
if there's a game that you look at it and you're put off by a minor thing, I know that some people will say like, oh well, you should just try it. But also at the same time, between 3,000-4,000 games being released every year. Like if you found an excuse to play every single one of them, you'd never get anything done.
Hmm.
So sometimes
Yeah.
you
That
have to judge a book by its cover. Like you have to be like, well, this thing is kind of giving me a warning sign. This
I
thing
signed on
is,
it.
oh yeah, this
Oh well.
this one is like, I'm immediately drawn to this. Go with your gut.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of my thing. Like there are people who be like, "Oh, art's not what matters," and I get that, and I respect that idea. But like you said, like I could play a game that's really good that has good art, or I could play a game that's really good that doesn't have good art. So if I only have room for one, I'm going to play the good art one every time because why wouldn't I? But
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
if you turn out not to like the game, then at least the art's good.
right, exactly. But like it seems like too. I don't know if there's really as strong a divide as there once was between the Ameritrash and Euro games. I feel like so many
No.
games incorporate elements of both, and I'm sure there's people who strongly prefer one or the other, and they're like, "Oh, that's a Euro element in my," or vice versa. Honestly, like I think of myself as pretty much an omni gamer. There's some games that don't appeal to me, but it's not really based on how much randomness or not there is. Like it just depends on my mood. So
Mm.
I'm not strongly for or against either. I probably have more Ameritrash games just because those are like the boxes that stand out for me. So I probably have looked at them more. But
Yeah.
you know, I've played Euro games that I really, really loved. So it's just a matter of being like, okay, I'm not necessarily as excited by what's happening in this artwork, but if the artwork's at least, fine, then
Mm.
exploring what it does in the game is probably really worthwhile to me. So I don't know. Do you? I mean, I guess would you personally prefer that there was more of a divide, or do you like the kind of integration of those two styles that is becomes? I don't even know if there's too many games that don't integrate both to some extent anymore, but
No, I would prefer, the kind of blurred lines between them. Like like you said, there's plenty of like hybrid games that use
Mhm.
both and use them very well. And I think there's enough stuff in the world that's sharply divided. I'd rather, you know, if we all love board games, let's all love board games. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I said I play a lot of Euro games. Like this week, I spent probably about 10 hours playing two games, of which there was very, very little like information that wasn't known. It was like we
Hmm.
played two big games where, it's all about the decisions you make, and there's everything is laid out in front of you. But then also one of my top played games of last year was a game where you literally just chuck dice in an arena.
Right.
And I think the more experienced gamers get, the more they kind of tend to veer towards perfect information games because they're able to kind of like understand systems a lot quicker,
Mm.
which means that they take on these complex systems easier. And you see people kind of looking down on randomness as some sort of like ungodly sin. But as a designer, there's no easier way to inject a bit of excitement into a game
Mm.
than with random chance. Whether it's flipping, a card over to reveal like whether the effect of something is pulled off, or whether it's what you kind of like have invested in, or if it's rolling a dice to determine an outcome. Like it is exciting. So I mean,
Yeah.
I wasn't lying when I said in American style games that dice rolling is just it's almost always exciting. Like, and if it goes
Mm.
against you, that's too bad. But then there'll be other times when you can like just be like, yeah, nailed it. Like that's exactly what I knew was going to happen because
Yeah.
put it all on this one dice roll, and it's paid off. It's a good feeling.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if you get too many, stand up and cheer moments with games where it's all perfect information. You know exactly how it's gonna.
Well, that
I
yeah,
don't think
that's
that
the thing.
happens.
It's those kind of moments that people remember as well, and I
Mhm.
think you know there are it's easier to do in those in games with random like reveals or resolutions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think if as a designer you want your game to be remembered, you want people to remember like, I remember when we played it and this happened. Like
Mhm.
that's what reminds you of that game and gets you playing again. Um, and it's not an easy element to capture because you could actually get those moments out of the driest game known to man
Right.
if you've got the right people playing with you.
Right. That's true. Yeah. And I know, like, in our when we were talking about it, like, I it's probably my fault I did this, but, like, I tried to make it I was making it sound like the themes have to be this very old school way of looking for of it, or, like, the Euro games really are all, like, old European cities, and, and that's really not the case. I mean, some might disagree with it, but I know, a lot of people will describe, like, Gloomhaven as a dungeon crawler or as a Euro game disguised as a dungeon crawler.
Mm,
And so in terms of like the old way of thinking of it, it's I suppose a very Ameritrash kind of theme, but um it's not like other dungeon crawlers are, and there's probably a bunch of other examples, but that's like the first one that popped to my head. But
Scythe,
you know
famously a game about
yeah,
giant mechs stomping over everyone, but it's actually a farming game in disguise.
yeah, exactly. There's so many things like that where if you're drawn to the this particular theme, but you don't like that particular type of game, like you can probably find it, or at least eventually you will, in the type of mechanics that you like, and
Mm.
it's no longer this thing where where I made it nearly as divided as it actually,
I mean,
more so
if you're
than it is.
debating against something, you use the straw man, don't you? You take the most
Yeah,
stereotypical version of it because it's easiest to attack. When
yeah,
in reality, both genres are so much more diverse now when it comes to
yeah,
themes. I'm constantly amazed by like the new themes that are appearing in games,
hmm,
and how much of a difference it can be, even if you're using familiar mechanisms
right,
or at least combining them in a different way. Like the way a theme integrates into a game can make a huge difference. And I love the fact that in the last few years we've really seen an explosion of different designers coming up with, excuse me, coming up with things that you know. I'm sure there's people out there designing them, but there's if you're looking at the games that are getting designed and the games that are getting published, that's what like 10% of games. So for those games with those themes that are, at this point unique, to make it to
right.
market is a huge positive step.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. There's I feel like it almost feels like every month there's somebody who comes up with a theme where I'm like, oh my gosh, I would have never thought of making a game about that, and that's amazing. And I hope that
Yeah.
continues for a good long time. So, well, all right. I mean, unless there's anything else you want to say on the topic, I guess I'll have you kind of tell people where they can follow you and check out what you're doing.
Yeah, I am pretty much everywhere. I'm permanently online. I'm at Minerva Tabletop on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Mastodon, and then I'm Minerva Tabletop Games. Um, that's my site, YouTube. I think that's pretty much everything. Um, gonna have a lot of stuff to announce in the near future because I've announced Crumbs, and we've got a lot to show off in the next month or so, with more like gameplay of it as well. So I'm really excited about that. It's the Kickstarter fulfillment phase is probably the most boring phase for like a self-publisher because you're like,
Yeah.
I get to design these games and publish them, and they're like, oh wait, I also have to deal with shipping and logistics. So it's
Yeah.
nice
Ugh.
to have fulfilled Swatch, and now I get to do like the really really cool stuff.
Right on. Well, folks, make sure you follow him so you can see everything that he's going to announce. I know I'm excited. I'm definitely interested in Crumbs for sure. because I just like sandwiches, and so a game about sandwiches is automatically going to draw my attention. I don't know if I'm just like a very hungry person or what, but uh, anyway, I do hope all of you have enjoyed this video. If you have, please hit like and subscribe and click the little bell icon so you can know about the next time I put out a video. Otherwise, look forward to see you all around the table again at All Games New and Old. Bye.
See ya.
Hi everyone, we now have a merch store, so help out the channel and check it out.
Yeah, all these games and the equipment and everything we do and costumes cost a lot of money. So anything you can do to help us out if you love our content would be really appreciated. We have t-shirts in tons of different colors and styles.
We have sweatshirts in a few different styles.
We have lots of you can drink out of, like coffee mugs, pint glasses.
We also have coffee tumblers and water bottles and a few other things.
Right, so
The following announcement has been paid for by AGNO.
hey y'all, check it out, brand new shirt. It's not just black, it's black and white. Get one today. You can get it with or without, for everyone, on the back. You want something to drink? Is it Thirsty Thursday? That's what that means, right? We got something for your morning, check that out. We got something for your day, and you know we got something for your night. Get your drink on with that. Get a little cold outside? Check out this premium hoodie. Damn, that looks good. You want to look good? You need this hoodie. What's that? You want a little color? Don't worry. AGNO has got you covered. You don't like purple and red? Don't worry. There's plenty more. Just check the store. All these clothes, not too big, not too small, just too sweet. Don't forget, All Games New and Old is for everyone.
The preceding announcement was paid for by AGNO.
So yeah, that's how you can get pretty much any Kickstarter at the all-in pledge level for free. So when you saved all that money, make sure you go to our merch store, spend some of that saved money to help us out. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you. Bye. If you enjoyed that video, you might also like this one.
Or this one.
If you like any of our videos, what you should do is click this little button to subscribe so you'll know about the next time we put out a video.
We'll see you around the table.
Bye.
Bye.